speakers uh, has been unable to join us, but that's fine. We have two other really good speakers, so we will continue. Today, what we're going to talk about is research ethics in relation to surveys. As we know, surveys are one of the most common methods of data collection in research. And I would even go so far as to say it's the most frequently used method. This morning I did a search on Google Scholar with the search terms ethics and surveys. Just the two words ethics and surveys, and there was 1,507,000 results in less than 1 second. So that just goes to show you how common a tool it is, used in many disciplines across subject areas. And of course, because of the pandemic, researchers who would not usually have used a survey have chosen to use surveys also. And because it's so commonly used, it is also important to discuss the ethical concerns that should be kept in mind when we use surveys, and our panelists present today will do just that. Before I introduce the panelists, let me share the format of the seminar. Our speakers will speak for about 20 minutes to half an hour each. Then we will hear from, so then therefore for the first hour. After that, we will take questions. I will moderate the discussion, but don't wait till the end. Feel free to add any questions and comments you have to the chat while the panelists are speaking. And once the panel presentations are over, we will take those questions up and answer them. The session will be recorded. It is being recorded because we make it available on the faculty's YouTube channel. Once we've started the session, I'll put the link on the chat. But if at any point somebody who is speaking wants not to be recorded, you just have to tell me and I will pause the recording. Let me now introduce the speakers. The first to speak will be Professor Amala De Silva from the Department of Economics. She researches in the areas of health and poverty, gender, the costing of health systems and diseases, and inequality. She has several publications in these areas and has authored publications for the WHO as well. I'm also going to add both the speakers' research profile websites to the chat. You can always go and look up their research more. I encourage that. We were supposed to have Professor Atula Ranasinghe, Senior Professor Atula Ranasinghe, but unfortunately he is unable to join us today. Our second panelist, therefore, will be Professor Sunetra Pereira from the Department of Demography, who specializes in the areas of migration and children, population aging, and the intersections of fertility, health, gender, and poverty. She has published on internal migration as well as fertility trends and patterns of Sri Lanka, several book chapters and journal articles on her research areas. She's also the current chair of the Ethics Review Committee of the Faculty of Arts. So let's start and proceed to hear from our speakers on this topic of what are the ethical procedures and concerns we need to keep in mind when we work on postgraduate, not just postgraduate, I would like to say, any kind of surveying this will be relevant to. Professor Amala?
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Kaushalya. I'm sorry I'm not late. I found it difficult to link on. I'm sorry. Can I share my screen?
Yes. Right. Now you should be able to share the screen.
Okay. So what I want to speak about is ethics in conducting surveys, and I'm actually talking about it starting from very early on in the process of doing research, from the point of conceptualization and preparation, so that you end up with an ethical survey. So I'm really going further back into the study process from the survey, starting with talking about conceptualization. But to begin with, what is the importance of ethics in social science research? Because often the need for ethics review is questioned in the context of social science research based on two arguments. Many people don't wonder why we need to have ethics review. But in social sciences, and there are two arguments used. One is that unlike in the case of medical sciences, it is argued that social research can do no harm. But this, of course, is undervaluing the psychological impacts that could occur, particularly when we are handling sensitive issues. And therefore, there is a strong justification for the need for ethics reviews, even in the social sciences. The second argument comes from the basis that the freedom of and autonomy of the researcher will be challenged by ethics clearance. But even social scientists tend to highly value these rights, and in fact, they feel that freedom and autonomy of the researcher is extremely paramount, and they feel that unlike in the medical sciences or the sciences, going in for an ethics review is actually challenging their own freedom and autonomy. But these rights are have to be, you have to, what the ethics review tries to do is it accepts the right of the researcher to have freedom and autonomy, but it then needs, what it tries to do is it tries to encourage responsibility. That responsibility must come along with the right of the researcher to have freedom and autonomy. So the practice of demanding ethics reviews for postgraduate studies in social sciences is now common all over the world, and we understand that it should be becoming more common in Sri Lanka as well. And in particular, we need to understand that very often, if you try to publish an article, many journals now request an ethics review document, and that is one of the sort of prerequisites before you can publish. So in time to come, ethics reviews and looking anyway, leaving aside ethics reviews, there is a great importance in doing ethical research. So what are the ethical issues related with conducting surveys in social sciences? This presentation will focus on starting, as I said, way before the survey, starting with conceptualization of the study, and then going on in between, it will also be focusing on choosing an appropriate research design. It will then also talk about avoiding bias, because bias is one of the biggest problems we face when we are doing a survey, both the bias of the respondent and the researcher. And finally, it will actually get on to questionnaire preparation. Some of the other issues related with doing the survey will come out as along with the material that Sunetra is presenting on pilot surveys, and we could maybe bring it up when we do the discussion afterwards. So when we start about conceptualization of the research process and ethics, sometimes selecting the research problem itself can involve research ethics. And I'm quoting from a publication which I have given here. Researchers shall work on the basis of basic respect for human dignity. While research can help promote the value of human life, it also could threaten it. Researchers must show respect for participants in their choice of topic. This implies that the research process must ensure freedom and self-determination, safeguard against harm and unreasonable suffering, and protect privacy and close relationships. And I'll touch on each of these in the next few slides. What do we have for ensure freedom and self-determination? Here, one major pitfall is paternalism, where the researcher limits the scope of responses of the respondent by considering themselves experts on the area being researched. Often we try to give them some answers and I get them to tick off the answer. Here we are actually doing something that comes under paternalism because we are deciding what their answers should be. It's often important actually in many contexts to leave an option called other, so that we leave the participant freedom to express their views, so that we are not paternalistic and saying these are the only possible answers you can have and therefore choose from the list I provide. The opposite extreme, of course, is participatory research, where the community determines variables and values. It is very good to do, but it's very complex in practice. But where possible, it is very important that before we start preparing our questionnaire, that we do get some idea of what the community thinks about an issue, and so that we can include some of those options also in the response range. Because otherwise, if we just put down the options that they can tick off from what we know, what the researcher knows, there is a very strong likelihood that we are going to fail them in ensuring the freedom and self-determination of the participants. They have their own, points to make. If we can have open-ended research, of course, they get the opportunity to give their viewpoints very clearly. But very often, our questionnaires actually ask them to tick off, giving a selected list of, tick off points. But when we do that, we are running the risk of that we are not ensuring the freedom and self-determination of our participants. Again, when we think about safeguarding against harm, as I said, most social scientists don't think that the research we do can harm others. But let me give you two examples, and you might join me and disagree with the fact that there is a possibility, you might agree with me that there is a possibility that our research could have a harm. For example, you want to study trade unions and you go to a company that is functioning smoothly and has no trade union. You ask questions about the importance of setting up a trade union, how trade unions would affect worker rights, what do they feel about their situation as they work in this company. You ask about their wages. You ask them to consider, would they consider agitating against asking for higher wages. You get material for your thesis about what people think about trade unions. What does the company get? The company gets worker unrest because you have stirred up a hornet's nest by going and asking questions from workers. Yes, your questions were not harmful, but over time, people might actually start thinking along these lines and get agitated. The second example is collecting information from active criminals or about the activities of criminals. And this could be dangerous for others who there might be retaliation against, or to the respondent or the researcher. When we are doing research, particularly, we have to be very sensitive not to go into what may be gray areas or what may be black areas where people are involved in criminal activities and asking for responses related to such activities. These are just two examples of harm that could be created and the need to safeguard against harm when we are thinking about what sort of research we ought to do. And finally, safeguarding against reasonable suffering. Is it fair to keep doing studies on those affected by natural disaster or faced by gender-based violence? If we can't provide a sort of conclusive solution, should you make people relive traumatic events? I'm just asking it as a question, because these are some of the things that we have to safeguard against reasonable suffering. And the final point about protecting privacy and close relationships. Yes, you're not asking for names of people, but you're surveying a close group, like a group of employees, and asking them what they think about the management. So though you don't have a problem that X or Y or Z might be fingered in the process for having given negative responses about the management, at the end of the day, the company will know whether their employers thought well of them or badly. And if they think that they thought badly about them, well, there is a problem that their privacy could be affected. When we do research involving companies or institutions, I know when we report the data, when we write up the data, we often use, company A, company B, company C, or institution X, institution Y, and institution Z. We try not to use the real names, but the people where you have done the research, those companies do know that they were one of the companies where the research was done. Similarly, when you go and talk to households, you are putting family relationships to test by discussing intimate topics as part of the research. You might even be creating disunity in a community when you go and ask questions from people in the community. But in the family case, very often we want to know, say, very simply about male-female, division of labor. But this sort of question, when people are answering it, the people themselves might be quite emotional about it, and the responses they give might not actually appeal very much to their spouse. So we really have to be very conscious about protecting privacy and close relationships. So when we think about, thinking about the research problem, social science research is multidimensional. One variable has many determinants and one variable can lead to many outcomes. It is not like the pure sciences where you can say keep other factors controlled. Here, none of the factors can be kept controlled and we are dealing with very dynamic situations. Then how the research problem is conceptualized is very important. And for ethical and scientific research, this involves working with many different variables, including drawing on multidisciplinary sources. Like an economist needing to focus on psychology and sociological factors as well as economic factors. Being careful not to leave out any relevant social groups because that could have a bias the research that is being done. But we know that often resources and time and the ability to deal with many dimensions is a problem. And so we have to be extremely explicit about the limitations of our study. For example, why did we focus on this particular social group? Why did we omit other groups? Why did we decide to study the situation in Koggala? Why didn't we study the situation in the whole country? These are factors that might seem very obvious, but for a study to be ethical, we really need to be very conscious in our selection of the study area, as well as realize that we cannot generalize from one study area to other study areas. Here, particularly, we are conscious of the issue about stance or beliefs of the researcher, because unlike in the sciences, these are a major issue in social sciences, and two alternative strategies can be adopted. Where the research, the first one, of course, is very common in maybe economics, maybe in medical sciences, where the research be being studied and use external reviewers to assess the study, including ERCs, to avoid any unintentional bias. And you can use other trained personnel to collect data who are alert to avoid bias. Basically, you can get independent groups, independent researchers. Right recently, I reviewed a questionnaire for one researcher as the independent reviewer, where she had actually two others. There were three people reviewing her questionnaire as independent experts because it's an area I was familiar with. It was health financing. And she was having three of us review her questionnaire as experts, as independent experts. So you can go for that sort of strategy and try to avoid bias. And the second thing, which is linked up in the same sentence, is that collecting the data also, you have to spend time to train the personnel so that they are very conscious to collect data without bias. Because sometimes even our tone of voice or how we ask the question might actually give a hint to the respondent as to how they should answer it. And we don't want to bias the responses. So people need to be trained as to how they should ask the question without putting any weight on any particular words, so that you do not bias the response you get from your questionnaire. The second approach used mainly in the some social sciences, particularly in sociology, is that at the beginning of the study, when writing up the study, the researcher begins by making a personal statement, revealing their personal biases so that the reader may be aware of any potential effect that such biases could have on the study, survey, and presentation of results. For example, X is a feminist, is heterosexual, supports Greenpeace, and is a vegan. Certain information, personal information is provided so that the person can get an understanding, so that if unconscious bias has crept into the write-up, the reader is well aware of what this bias is. But we need to be very conscious when we are doing research to avoid bias, and sometimes having an organization like an ethics review committee is important for avoiding any unintentional bias. Again, the problem of bias is very strong in research, because research is being done on the thinking or behavior, on the thinking or behavior of human beings. Now, in the previous slide, I talked about the bias that comes from the side of the researcher, but bias might also come from the side of the participant. I don't think you have time to read this, so let me just summarize. There's a little cartoon here where it's Hobbes and Calvin, for those of you who are familiar with Hobbes and Calvin, where Calvin is filling out a questionnaire for a magazine called Chewing. And he says, they asked how much money I spend on gum each week, chewing gum. So I wrote $500. For my age, I put 43. And when they asked me what my favorite flavor is, I wrote garlic / curry. And then the Hobbes, who is the tiger, is saying this magazine should have some amusing advertisements soon, because, of course, based on these questionnaires, somebody will get the data, and it might, get them thinking about what sort of products to put on the market. And because rubbish has been provided, it's garbage in, garbage out, people will start putting ads for products that involve garlic and curry, and think about chewing gum, which is flavored with garlic and curry. So social sciences involves a wide range of disciplines that makes laying down common ethical stances more complex. Researchers are also human, and being human is consciously or unconsciously subject to biases, which is the point I made in the first of the 3 slides. Researchers could also influence responses, results in the way the questionnaire is formulated, how the questions are asked, the order of the questions, and finally, how they interpret the responses. So it is very important, actually, that we are very conscious of bias when we are preparing our questionnaire. Social sciences often focus on current crises. Let's take COVID, for example. So this leads to very passionate researchers. People who are doing research often have very passionate views. If you ask me to prepare a questionnaire right now about vaccination provision, I would be as like that, a passionate researcher. But the problem is that when you are a passionate researcher, the problem can lead to very unethical research being done, because you have very strong ideas about something, and you will probably, the way you are doing your study might actually give you ammunition for what you already plan to say. Now, even this is very common among students also, because it's areas you have worked on, which you are now going to be doing research on. You think that some way of something happening is right, and then very often when you're preparing the questionnaire tends to be slightly slanted towards what you think is right in the questions you ask. So that's why I am alerting you to the fact that when we are doing research, we have to be very conscious of our own, sometimes, as I mentioned, if you're a passionate researcher, known bias, but it could also be sometimes very much that unconsciously, unintentionally, you are biased by your own background or by your own interest in the area. So finally, to get down very specific to household individual surveys, there is, of course, a problem in selecting the relevant population. One of the things we stress is that it has to be voluntary participation. But very often, sometimes people will go and do research on students or patients, or an institutionalized population, like maybe some elderly home or maybe a prison. Now, these are not actually voluntary participants. Students will take part in our research because they don't want to say no to a lecturer. But we have to realize that it is then not voluntary participation if we get them to fill out a questionnaire in class. Sometimes being part of a sample could lead to stigma. When we do chronic kidney disease research, we try not to have the word chronic kidney disease of unknown origin, that's where the U comes from, CKDU households in the title of the page, because that would mean that every household we are going to, it's like carrying a red flag. Wherever the researcher is going, it's clear that there is a household that is affected by chronic kidney disease. Similarly, if you think about poor households, we often do research in poor communities. We try not to stress that what we are visiting are poor households. Why? Because if you are labeled as a poor household, that could create problems for you among your community. It could be quite embarrassing for a household. There is also the problem of getting informed consent from illiterate populations because they have poor functional literacy. They don't understand. We go a little bit of the way by getting it interview administered rather than letting the person fill it up themselves. But very often they are not familiar about informed consent. As one of the researcher told me, she was working on children and speech and language therapy. She actually wanted to get consent, and I was telling her she'll find it quite difficult to get consent to take pictures and what do you call it, to video the children, which is what she wanted to do, which was important for her study. And later she came and told me, by the way, what was not difficult was not getting permission to video and getting the permission to take pictures of the children. In fact, they were quite excited. The mothers were quite excited. They dressed up the kids and wanted them photographed. But what they didn't found very difficult to do was to sign the informed consent form. They insisted that they needed to consult their husband, they needed to consult their mother-in-law before they signed this piece of paper. And we have to be understanding of this as researchers. We take these things for granted. But if you are not very literate, you don't know, you don't want to sign something which maybe you're signing away your house. You don't know what you're signing. So it's very important that when we are doing informed consent, we really take the trouble to explain what is on the form to them. We have it in the language they can understand. But there again, don't assume that they will sign a consent form without consent from others. Be tolerant of the fact that we have to go the extra mile if we want to do a research with people who do have a problem with literacy. There are also certain populations that are tired of being researched. We were told this when we were doing the chronic kidney disease research. After the tsunami, people who lived on the beach side, people were near close to beaches, they were tired of being researched. And over-researched population groups, actually their rights are being taken away by the situation because everybody wants to keep doing research with them. And they feel that that research does not bring anything for them. Very often the problem is that we can't promise them anything from the research we are doing, particularly if we are students. So therefore, it is important to get them interested in participating in the research and helping us get the information we need. But since they know that it will not bring them any material gains, then this could be a little bit of a problem. And we have to be extra conscious about these over-researched population groups. Maybe your study also needs to go to the same group, but it should be done in a way that we do not make it a bother to them because they are already tired of surveys. The second issue that comes up is sampling. Now, the problem is that in social sciences, we can't go for very large samples. Why? Because very often our survey instruments are long. We really cannot spend the time. We don't have the time due to our own study limitations to go to a lot of people and get this amount of information. Therefore, we tend to choose, and when we are doing sampling, we try to say sampling, and we try to say random sampling, but as the cartoon shows, but they were selected from a random sample. You can see from the look of the people on that slide that this is very strange that if all of them were selected randomly. So we really have to be very careful to select without being biased towards one particular type of person. Not go to people we really know personally or go to areas because it's convenient to us, but to go to the area that will best serve our purpose. And if we are concerned about covering issues like ethnicity or religion or age, maybe stratified sampling at least to ensure that all those categories of people we are interested in are covered in our sample. The last one is when we are preparing our questionnaire, we have to base it on the literature. So very often students love to get a questionnaire together and run to the field. I often have a great effort holding back my students saying you don't go to the field till your questionnaire is perfect. And till you finish your literature review, no talking of going to the field because you don't get two bites to the cherry. You can't do 2 surveys. You don't have the money or the time. So therefore, it's very important that your instrument that you go to the field with is as comprehensive as necessary and as free of errors as possible. So we really need to first do your literature review, and your questionnaire should be based on what you have found from the literature review. Then when you have done that, you can also use key informants or experts to get ideas and go through the questionnaire. This is often very useful because that, one person looking at a questionnaire, you and your supervisor looking at the questionnaire, your thoughts tend to be on the same, platform. Someone outside looking at the questionnaire often sees things that could be included or excluded, and is very useful. I also always advise my students to go to laypersons to fill out the questionnaire. That is, doing a pilot is very important, but before you come to the pilot, and the pilot is what Sunetra will be talking about, before you do the pilot survey, sometimes to just ask, I say your mother, sister, cousin, neighbor, your domestic, someone who's of the same level of education and understanding as the participants. Because we as people who have done a degree, and all of you have, we take things like proportions very much for granted. What proportion of your salary do you spend on health? Is very often a question I see students put down. But when I ask them, you tell me the answer to that, they realize even they can't answer the question because they can't remember what they spent on. But actually, someone who doesn't have a degree or at least A levels doesn't really know what you mean by a proportion of your income. How do you do that calculation? So it's always useful to use a lay person to check out the questionnaires. Length of the questionnaire, remember that the participants' time is important too. You can't put all the questions you want to ask. Participants are also busy people. Try to go at a time when they are free to answer your questions. Ask them a time and go when they are free, but still you don't want to take many hours of their time filling out your questionnaire. Remember, they have childcare activities, they have cooking to do, they have their work to do if they are in a work setting. Remember that respondents' dignity and feelings must be considered, and you have to realize that there are differences in personalities and thresholds of tolerance among respondents, and these should be considered. You can't expect, you ask people like, why are you poor? Are you lazy? You are poor because you're lazy, things like that. You have to be very conscious that respondents' dignity and feelings, what you may feel threatened by being asked, don't ever ask that from another person. It's not ethical, it's also, because respondents' dignity and feelings are some of the things that are very important for ethics, because we're trying to safeguard their privacy, we are trying to safeguard their dignity. But also, as from a human point of view, always don't ask a person something you wouldn't want to be asked. Participants' safety, as I mentioned earlier, querying about illegal activities, issues of illegal information being revealed. There's a big problem here. If in a company, you find out that someone is cheating on their boss, cheating on the company. Do you reveal the matter to the boss, to the police? If you reveal the matter to the boss, or if you don't do it, you have this information, but you don't reveal it to the boss, you know that there's gender violence going on, you keep it to yourself, then actually you are an accomplice after the fact, because you knew what was happening and you did not really do anything to stop something that was a very dangerous situation happening. So those are some of the points I wanted to discuss with you. And I'll hand over to Sunetra, and I'll be happy to take questions after that if any of you have questions. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you, Professor De Silva. A very comprehensive, fast summary of how to conceptualize, prepare, and implement a survey. I also loved the cartoons, by the way. Professor Sunetra Pereira speaks to us now about that important step that Professor De Silva flagged, which is piloting the survey. And before I hand over to Professor Sunetra, I just want to say, please feel free to add your questions or comments to the chat. Thank you. Professor Sunetra.
Thank you, Dr. Kaushalya Pereira. Let me thank first Dr. Kaushalya Pereira, Director Postgraduate Studies, for organizing this useful workshop for our postgrad students. Let me just share my PowerPoint. So I am going to talk on research ethics in conducting surveys in relation to pilot survey questionnaires. I think Professor Amala Silva already explained very comprehensive and how we should do act on ethical aspects of doing surveys. So my concern is actually just focus on why we need to do pilot studies and reasons for conducting pilot studies and what are the ethics concerns with regard to pilot studies and some aspects of piloting research instrument and analysis of pilot survey data, how as postgrad students and as researchers we should be keen on in maintaining our ethical standards. So a pilot study is a trial run of the entire study from beginning to end that increase the likelihood of success for our whatever research that are being conducted. It is essential to manage ethical problems in conducting qualitative and quantitative survey research. In order to manage ethical problems, the pilot studies are key. So pilot studies are very much help to prevent any possible violation of the participants are concerned, their ethical and human rights during the main study, not only main study, during the pilot study as well, we have to very keen on maintaining ethical standards. So if we look at the needs for pilot studies, I think so we need little bit concern on pilot surveys are usually known as feasibility study as well. Interviewers for training interviewers and also final survey instrument questionnaires testing are rehearsed prior to the actual study. So ethical concerns are need to be taken into consideration, especially to ensure that the entire research process of main study will do ethical. So the pilot studies is must from methodological standard actually point is concerned to ensure that sampling and recruitment strategies of respondents, especially survey administration, data collection and analysis of research is done properly. If you actually concern on pilot studies, at the end of the main studies, you could be very happy about your outcome of the results if you do adherent to ethics. So pilot then, if we concern on main surveys, actually our focus is going to be to manage main survey very efficiently. So before that, if we conduct pilot studies, so then those kind of pilot studies are very crucial element of a good study design, good research design. So literature says about pilot studies, so scholars have already researched in many aspects of pilot studies. So I have taken one actually cited by two scholars. So according to them, by conducting a pilot study, researchers can enhance the probability of successfully completing the main study. by identifying and avoiding mistakes that could otherwise ruin the main study. You need to concern on your main study. So if you have not actually piloted your research instrument and the process, the maybe analytical techniques, and also that's actually going to ruin the main study. So not protecting participant anonymity and confidentiality are other two actually aspects, so that can be minimized actually that means threat to participant, or that the can be minimized while taking pilot studies, because you know what sort of queries to be addressed and also what are the ethical considerations to be followed while undertaking pilot studies. Therefore, addressing queries regarding ethical considerations, so you would be able to do your proposed research actually design, plan for logistics and recruitment, your participants and sampling, as Samala already mentioned. All these the processes could be done effectively if you could plan for a pilot study prior to the final study. So reasons for conducting pilot studies actually that's also very much cited in the literature. Basically actually to identify potential problems and assess whether the project is feasible, realistic and rational from beginning to end. So if you can judge actually while conducting a pilot study. And also through the pilot study, the researcher able to see what resources are necessary for the full study. And also kind of for an example, number of interviewers, so number of data entry operators or data coders, how many data analysts are concerned, how many, basically what sort of software that you need, and time taken for, especially for your data gathering, and also time taken for analysis, and this sort of issues could be resolved while doing pilot study prior to the final study. So the one important aspect of pilot study is you would be able to train interviewers so through the pilot study, because so when you conduct a pilot study as a researcher, you could be able to observe, assess whether interviewers are unbiased, answers, whether they can answer questions, whether they are competent in clarifying points about surveys and research objectives, whether they are aware, and so you could be able to train the interviewers that could support to your final study. And also, so if you are planning for a pilot study prior to the main study, so your administration procedure also make much more easier when you administrate your final study. So test for your, usually you could be able to test the sampling and administration of survey procedures, everything could be tested. And also recruitment approaches are concerned. So you should be you could be able to discover problematic features in your the study. Through pilot study. Not only that, but also data analysis, because this part actually most of researchers actually that's not actual. So most of researchers actually omit, I mean, the data analysis component, but while you are doing pilot study, you can more concern on the data analysis. So then, because it provides some raw data sets, because you pilot a couple of questions, you gather information, so you can actually enter data, that means process the piloted data, and if you can do analysis, so then you would be able to identify what are the problems that might occur during the final study. You can actually think in terms of what sort of anticipated issues arise. And also important convince stakeholders that, because if you are doing pilot studies, so that actually provide very comprehensive justification for your study is being conducted in adherent to ethical grounds. So then, if you do when you do a pilot study, it is easy for your stakeholders to convince, especially you are taking funding from any organization. So this would help you to prove that the study is workable. So when you pilot in the survey, so then in your research is concerned, you should pilot your research instrument. That means with regard to survey questionnaire, not only in quantitative research, that survey research, but also in qualitative research. If you do piloting your research instrument, whatever interview guideline or in-depth interview guideline, so that would actually add an advantage for you to conduct your main study. So if you consider this quotation, it says whether you have constructed your own questionnaire. Sometimes you used to construct your own questionnaire according to your research objectives. But sometimes you are using an existing instrument, so that may be perhaps validated in certain contexts, but you are using for your analysis. But remember that always pilot it on respondents who are actually representative of your definitive sample. Otherwise, so that will affect on your final study. Because some people used to see that, so they take existing instrument, existing questionnaires, actually less likely to go for final studies and just on final study. But at the end, so they may sometimes come up with, because the contextual factors are different, so then at the end will not actually be successful. So therefore, you need to build in protected time for this phase, that means piloting phase, and get approval from an ethics committee is suggested by Boynton in 2004 in his actually writing. So, but in our settings, so we see that from our ethics clearance we are getting number of applications, but we don't see that researchers seek approval for pilot studies, but usually for the main studies, so they apply to get them. But when you do surveys, so we encourage you to get ethical approval, ethics approval for your piloting as well. So ethics concerns are, I think most of the concerns already discussed by Professor Amala. So I actually want to highlight an important aspect of this, why we do piloting, because we know that the participant, usually even we do questionnaire design. So we see that most of the researchers, basically inexperienced researchers used to include participants' name or respondents' name in the questionnaire, but it should not be done. Participant information do not include participant's name in your research instrument, that means in the questionnaire. So participant addresses or other identifying markers within the questionnaire, or perhaps when you process the data, when you make databases, should not include participants' information, but make actually better participants' number instead of name, but that also can be kept in a manual file. So it is highly suggested to keep in a manual file is better. And also how to pilot your questionnaire is concerned, it is very similar to whatever survey, but you need to concern key aspects. Mainly you need to consider who you have invited to complete your pilot questionnaire or pilot schedules, or so you need to think in terms of the sampling frame, because as you know, in survey research, sampling frame is the key. So if you want to go for a randomized sampling, we need to have up-to-date sample frame. That means list of people that you are going to study. But likewise, if you do pilot survey also, you need to more concern on, more concern on the sample frame as well. And also how to distribute and administer your pilot questionnaire is also important. Perhaps we use interviewer administered questionnaire or self-administered, or nowadays mostly common using Google surveys, that means the electronic surveys. Postal questionnaire is very much not actually used currently, but whatever the instrument you decide based on your research objectives, and also based on your potential participants. So whether and when you need to send the remind letters and everything, you need to actually determine and pre-plan is better. So when you actually do self-administered questionnaire, usually you use to mail or post, or sometimes also you can use RAS, or researcher can do by himself, no matter, but interviewer administered questionnaire in most of the survey research, you see that interviewer administered questionnaire is coming in that sense. You need to train interviewers, not actually not to get any harm to study participants. So then the pilot study is very much useful for us to do all these training aspects and the testing, so how and what sort of problems might occur when we do our mail study. The response rate and completion rate are also concerned when we decide, if we decide we go for self-administered or electronic, via electronic or postal. So that also need to be very, because we are not getting much response once we mail questionnaires. And another three more as a common actually aspects that we need to remember. The general rule of thumb to pilot test the survey on 30 to 100 participants. So then if you, depending on your size of the sample that you are going to study in your main study, and you may decide at least maybe a number 30 to ranging from 30 to 100 participants. But 30 means, so that is very much useful for you to think through the whatever piloted data and data processing and analyzing, and also that's why the number should be useful to for you to think before deciding to go for piloting. So then once you actually have the instrument ready, one thing is, so you can actually think how you should do your piloting. So usually once you completed the final revision of the piloted questionnaire, you can actually determine how the main survey, whether it need to be amended, the instrument, or so what are the administration procedure, or in the process, what are the things you need to key in on in order to make your the final study successful. So piloting instrument question, the actually survey instrument can actually be very successful if you are concerned on these questions. So during the piloting, you need to take certain notes on the following: how participants react to your questionnaire. So because that means sometimes participants used to refuse to respond to your questionnaire. So that's why you need to very keen on what are the sections of questionnaire, so they easily understand. Also, I think Professor Amala already discussed that part. So how to actually make our questionnaire go to the layperson first and to see so whether they can understand. So then we need to monitor during the piloting so how participants react to your questionnaire, and also how long do respondents take to complete questionnaire also very well, because sometimes that our students used to prepare questionnaires that it take more than 2 hours to complete sometimes. But so there are certain surveys like national surveys like DHS, and also it takes more time, but so they have proper training for interviewers to conduct long hours. But even that, so they used to pilot questionnaire before going to main survey. So this is the most important point. And also, do any question need to be repeated or explained? Perhaps in your questionnaire, some participants may not understand what it's, if you are putting more, because technical jargon. So that's why actually you have to monitor what are the questions that they can easily understand, what are the questions that you can get expected information, and so on. Do they show confusion or surprise at a particular response? So then sometimes it can happen depending on the way you have structured your question. So these kind of the answering to the taking notes on or your own observation or your RAs, you just train your interviewers just to take notes on this particular aspect. So then they would be able to actually take notes, and then later on they it could be actually used to fine-tune your final schedules. Avoiding leading to critical errors in piloting. So in most cases, we see that piloting is actually done on the actually researchers' preference, not thinking in terms of ethical grounds. So for an example, piloting on friends rather than target groups. So, and sometimes sampling. So most of the students, they prefer to go convenience sampling rather than random sampling. But at the end, so they actually face certain problems when it comes to present their results, and so concerning internal and external validity and so on. So therefore, actually, you need to very much concern on so to avoid critical errors when you piloting. And also avoid potential biases, also important, because Professor Amala, I think, very well explained this aspect. Recruitment and data collection process is concerned, we need to avoid potential biases. If we recruit participants, as actually convenient to us to reach, or so that so that actually will affect on our final results, because we are not actually reaching the target group. So that's why actually we need to more concern on these aspects. For an example, actually, so suppose you are planning to do your study in Gampa Hospital. So then in this case, so you decided to do 30 cases. So sometimes, so once you do pilot in Gampola Hospital, so then if you take the same, maybe the hospital to do your final study, I think so it will affect on sometimes the participant who actually interviewed at the pilot survey. They will talk to their friends about survey, and so sometimes if there are some negative things, so when sometimes could be when final study, it can affect on final study. So that's why actually we encourage usually, if you do pilot in different settings, so that is very much essential to avoid this sort of negative consequences. So that strategy is to pilot in another hospital, maybe Kurunegala Hospital, final survey as planned, you can do in Gampola Hospital. So, but the two the locations are concerned, but should be the, as I think Samala already mentioned about this aspect. So the should be similar. So then whatever the ground, whatever the hospital, of course both hospitals should be similar. So if you are taking two contrast different target people, so then that also will affect on final study. So let me actually point out another 2-3 aspects with regard to administering your questionnaire. So then scientific and ethical considerations, if you include the following aspects are also important. And so among them all, you can actually think the needs and preference of participants, who should understand what is required of actually them, remain interested and cooperative throughout completion. Also, you have to think when you do the pilot survey, and also be asked the right questions and have their responses recorded accurate. Also, they should be actually used to receive appropriate support during and after complete the questionnaire. Sometimes debriefing can be done. But during the administration procedure, so the researcher is able to understand the skills and resources available to research team. Sometimes, if not that much, depending on the resources, sometimes in some research they avoid doing pilot surveys or piloting instruments, so then that will affect on their main survey. The nature of your study, whatever you can actually administering pilot survey and the main study, is you have to decide so what kind of procedure should be followed. So then all these, whatever the procedures, pilot survey, you can actually through the pilot survey, you should be able to understand what are the problems associated with your own instrument, and then you can modify whatever the feedback and observation or notes that you have taken based on your pilot. So therefore, so the main study could be done properly. So there may be some administrative errors. So when you do piloting survey, that should be actually avoided. The researchers giving the questionnaire to wrong participant. Sometimes when you do the piloting, so when researchers do piloting, so perhaps so they want to pilot. Actual main study is going to be aimed at women, maybe say for an example, female-headed household. But when do the piloting, used to do piloting with men. So that kind of thing should be avoided. And also, so let me quickly run through, I think all these things already, some of the aspects already mentioned by Samala. So another 2-3 important fact survey research tend to focus on people who have completed. Sometimes if you you have to remember that so that if you want to complete actually pilot study successfully, you need to actually number of concerns should be actually addressed in the pilot stage of your survey administration in order to minimize your issues. And one important aspect, I told you that most of the pilot studies when you do, so you avoid actually taking doing data processing and analysis. Just only most of the students used to do piloting just to modify the questionnaire and just to finalize the instrument. But they are not thinking in terms of the data processing and analysis of pilot studies. I think this is also one key aspect, because that can actually have, if you actually process your piloted data, and if you do analyze properly, you should be able to predict the type of analysis required, whether you are getting enough data or whether what are the lacking areas. So likewise, you could be able to add whatever important aspects on your analysis, thinking on the main studies. I think these are the things that I want to share. So I wish if you can go through some of the references given here, so that can actually have more understanding on how to do pilot studies and what is the significance and how we can do ethically. Thank you very much for everyone.
Thank you, Professor Surendra. I also want to thank Professor Surendra personally for reminding us that pilot in the questionnaire doesn't mean just the questionnaire, but also involves analysis. I find that a lot of my students have this misperception also. We are open to questions now. Please feel free to unmute your mic and ask the question. Please keep it short. Or you can type your question into the chat box and I will read it out. While you do that, please answer these 3 questions I am putting in a poll. It's to help us make this better. It shouldn't take time. You can do it while we are talking. And while you add your comments or want to speak and gather your thoughts, I will just quickly read out these 2 comments, rather not questions. Valli Puranathan Murali says pilot study information sheet should be slightly different from the from the final study information sheet, in the aspect that the participants need to be informed that pilot study may not always end up in the final study. And Gaveshika De Silva says, no, pilot study questions and main study questions are the same. We are doing a pre-test to finalize the questionnaire. I assume there are comments to help the discussion along, but is there anyone else who wants to raise a question?
Kaushalya, shall I try to respond to that comment? You have a, there are 2 things we can do with the pilot findings. Sometimes if it is from the same, population, then some people put it into the final analysis, and in some cases you don't. Whether you need to inform the participants, your title of your questionnaire could really use the word pilot, but other than that, I don't think there's a need to warn them that their data will not be used for the final analysis. I think particularly if you're planning to include it in it, it should not be that instruction is unnecessary. But anyway, I'm not sure you really need to make a big distinction between the 2 by telling people, but except that because you are taking their time, maybe you would like to tell them that they're going to help you do your study. So it's part of the preparation. You might want to, your instruction sheet, your information sheet might have a few lines to that effect. The questionnaires will actually, as said by the second person, be exactly the same, except that once you do your pilot, you might decide to change some of the wording in the second, in your final, what you're going to use in your final survey, because sometimes what comes up in pilot surveys is that certain words are hard to understand for people, or certain methods of rating are difficult. So you might actually make some adjustments depending on your pilot. So it may not be exactly the same questionnaire. And if that's the case, then you should not use the pilot data coming into the final with the final data, because since certain questions have been changed, then you cannot really put the data together, because then it's like apples and oranges. Thank you. That's all I want to say, Kaushalya.
Thank you, Professor De Silva. Professor,
I think Gaveshika asked the question about because I know she's actually working with the DCS, because DCS they used to use the pilot, their national survey questionnaires and also the census questionnaires. So if Gaveshika is there, are you there, Gaveshika?
Yes, madam.
Yes, so then you want to actually, because you are also, your concern is with regard to that, no?
Yes, madam. Actually, madam, when we are doing a survey, we are after we prepare the questionnaire, we are doing a pre-test in the field.
Yes. But so the piloting is the pre-testing, just you are pre-testing the instrument, no? Only the
No, not the
questionnaire.
questionnaire. Yeah, questionnaire.
Yeah, yeah.
Pre-test is for the questionnaire. So
Yeah.
once we done the pre-test, and then we if there is some error, we have to correct it. And then if we need to go to the field again, we are doing a second pre-test. And after that, the questionnaire is almost finalized.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's fine actually, Gaveshika, in that case, but not unlike other researchers, you have advantage because you are well trained for that purpose. The piloting is actually not only the research instrument, so the entire research process prior to the main study. But in your case, you are pre-testing the questionnaire. Is that correct, Professor
Yeah, that's right.
Amala will add?
Yeah, if the person already has research experience, they may not gain so much in terms of process from the piloting, but particularly students who have previously not done, the surveys, then I think even the process gets tested in the course of the course of the piloting as well as the instrument.
Yes, madam.
And
Can
I
I
think,
Can I add something, madam?
Yeah.
Actually, madam, the pilot is a very important thing because during the during the piloting, only we know that our questionnaire is working properly in the data and for the data analysis and the table when we are doing the table formats.
Yeah.
So then we know how our questionnaire is going on, and the budget and the timing and everything we can manage. Then the pilot is the most important thing from my side.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with
Yeah.
me. This is why Sunetra was asked to do this presentation on piloting, because we all understand that it's a major part of the research. And thank you, Sunetra, for handling it. I mean, I think everyone understood the importance, the way you presented,
Thank you,
you brought
madam.
out all the aspects.
Do we
Thank
have
you,
any
madam.
other questions? Any other questions that you want to ask, clarify things from our two resource people? This is a really good opportunity.
And also, I actually must say that the successful pilot means the final study is going to be very successful, because so there may be, because that's depend on the administration procedure, and also because that's why the other the processes, other steps need to be carefully designed and piloted, each and every aspects of your research, in order to make your final one to make a successful one.
Yes, Mr. Murali, your point is perfectly right that the questions are the same, but the information sheet will have to be done separately for the two exercises. Yes, you're perfectly right, because what we are asking from the respondents is different in the two cases, but they're related but different, because in the first case, we are also asking them to provide their information to help us finalize our survey instrument. So we can change our information sheet slightly to bring that factor in. So you're perfectly right that they're different from one another.
We have a few minutes more. If anyone has any questions to clarify, can I also please urge the participants to answer the poll while we are doing this? Okay, I have a small question from the two resource people. I wonder whether either or both of you could speak very briefly about any significant ethical considerations that we should keep in mind when analyzing the data. Unlike in qualitative research data, like for example, when I do interviews, there is a lot more space to interpret, right? So I'm wondering whether there are things that we need to keep in mind when analyzing the data that we collect from surveys and presenting them.
one of the issues is that if you have any possibility of comparing your findings with any other, either an existing other data set or with some other researchers' work, then it's always richer if you can, bring in other people's findings to compare with yours. That it's a way of validating maybe what you have done, or maybe in certain cases it's like coming out with a different perspective which has not come out with in other studies, but it always makes the presentation of it, the interpretation, look more solid if you can bring in evidence from other studies or from other, maybe like other Department of Census and Statistics data. Say we are doing something about income, or we are doing something about consumption patterns. There is data that we can bring in from, say, the household income and expenditure survey, which could actually contribute to what the work we have done. And if you are working on, say, maybe use of cigarettes or use of alcohol, there is certain information that's coming from at a national level that might be quite interesting when coupled with your own findings. So that is one way, and also using the right statistical tests, obviously. And that's where the sampling is very important, that you have your sample large enough to do the type of statistical tests you're planning to do. So if you're really the smallest size of sample, maybe something like 40 to 50 households, because if you go any below that, then you really can't use any statistical methods. So in the sampling, to be conscious of the interpretation needing statistical analysis and what you should use for that. So those are the 2 points that come to mind.
And also, if I add something, actually, thank you, Dr. Kaushalya, because of I experience with the because once we get some secondary data sources, our student used to delete missing cases. But sometimes the missing means just only one variable or two variables data are missing, but for others the data, but sometimes they actually use whatever to put on glance on whatever the variable that they are interested. If the reported missing cases are there, so they used to delete. I think Professor Amala also have noted this with, so that will affect on the results, because we are actually excluding some important information, because the missing data for one variable will be actually deleting rather than deleting, actually keeping is better.
Just to add one more point, that sometimes when we do our data analysis, we tend to actually talk about mean or median, or where we use the data. But then very interesting sometimes is to analyze the outliers separately in a separate section of your interpretation. That if you analyze the outliers, because sometimes those outliers are telling us some very interesting cases. Like, for example, if you take health expenditure, you find that most people are spending a certain amount. There are 2 or 3 households that have spent a lot. Then it could be very interesting to see why those 2 or 3 households why those 2 or 3 households, why those 2 or 3 households are outliers. The very fact that they're outliers might give us some very interesting information. It could be distance, or it could be that they're using a mix of Western public and Western private. So it's always interesting when you get your data, not to just stick to discussing the means and the the middle of the level and the ground area findings, but also to focus a little bit on the outliers. And as Sunetra talked about, missing data is also another issue that we have to be very conscious of.
Thank you, Professor De Silva and Professor Pereira. Any other questions? Well, I think we can take one last question, if at all. Okay. So I'm going to close now. But thank you so much. It's been a really useful seminar. And I think I want to thank all of you for that very engaged discussion on this Saturday evening of a long weekend of all things. And especially thank you to Professor Sunitra Pereira and Professor Amala De Silva for taking the time out to prepare in such a comprehensive way on surveying. I always find that a lot of the time students especially want to do surveys because it's the most common method, and I find students coming to me all the time. And so we see you again at the next postgraduate research seminar in ethics. Please feel free to write to me or put on the chat here any other kinds of topics related to ethics and postgraduate research, or any research ethics issues that you want us to discuss in the next few sessions as well. And enjoy the rest of the evening and the weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Kaushalya. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Amala.
ඇයි? ඔව් දැනුයි ඉවරුනේ ඇයි?